Hi everyone and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. I've talked about the 17th issue of George magazine and how this was the first issue that JFK Jr.'s name appeared at the top of the staff list and Michael Berman's name was moved to the bottom. Another really interesting thing is look who's on the back of the 17th issue. Marilyn Monroe. But today I wanted to highlight somebody who's been in the news recently, and a lot of you from Virginia will know this name very well. And this is an article that was highlighted in this issue of George, and it's very interesting. It talks about connections to the Clintons and fundraising and lots of other things. So let's get into it. This article is called The Bounty Hunter. Terry McAuliffe raised $37 million for President Clinton last year. He may be the best fundraiser in politics, but what's really impressive about McAuliffe is the way scandal never seems to touch him, no matter how he raises the money. Last Halloween, David Eisenstadt, the congressional reporter for the New York Daily News, was working in his office when his phone rang. His editors in New York wanted him to write a money story. For weeks, the New York Times and the Washington Post had been reporting that the DNC appeared to have accepted illegal donations from Asians. And just 2 weeks before, John Huang, one of the DNC's top money raisers, had been suspended from his job amid questions about the $4 million he had pulled in. But with the presidential election just days away, the Daily News hadn't run anything on the simmering Clinton fundraising scandal. So Eisenstadt, a co-winner of a Pulitzer Prize, began calling his stable of sources in the Clinton administration. According to the article he later wrote, several of them said that Huang was just a fall guy. The real story, they said, and Eisenstadt would write, was Terry McAuliffe, the president's top fundraiser who created the president's fundraising strategy. If you wanted to get to the bottom of the Clinton fundraising scandal, they said, the man to write about wasn't John Huang. It was Terry McAuliffe. Eisenstadt then wrote a short article saying that McAuliffe, the former finance director of the DNC and chief fundraiser for the Clinton-Gore campaign, quote, has long tried to tap big Asian-linked campaign contributors. McAuliffe, Eisenstadt reported, supervised Huang's money raising. The story was buried on page 29, where it's likely that relatively few Daily News readers even noticed it. But McAuliffe did. Shortly after reading the article, McAuliffe called the Daily News' owner, Mort Zuckerman, and barked at him for almost 20 minutes. "You own a rag," he told Zuckerman. The next morning, the Daily News apologized for the story in a retraction remarkable for its lack of equivocation. The Daily News yesterday quoted unidentified sources as saying that Terry McAuliffe oversaw efforts to solicit foreign sources for contributions that may be improper. Upon re-interviews, the sources could not substantiate the allegations. The News regrets publishing their assertions. Then on November 11th, Eisenstadt, who disputes that any, quote, re-interviews ever took place, was abruptly fired. McAuliffe's friends say he bragged for weeks about, quote, getting a reporter fired. He was definitely pleased with himself, says one acquaintance of McAuliffe's. He said he lit up Zuckerman. He mentioned it in passing in conversations that had nothing to do with the story. Eisenstadt's attorneys certainly thinks that McAuliffe used his clout to get the reporter sacked. David was fired because he was right, argues his lawyer, John Shubin, who is considering legal action against the Daily News. Zuckerman confirms that McAuliffe made the call, but says that he simply referred the matter to the appropriate editors. McAuliffe, who has said that he barely knew Huang, did not respond to repeated requests for an interview. The Palm has a reputation as Washington's clubbiest restaurant, and it's not without some justification. In this small, boxy steakhouse, lawmakers, lobbyists, members of Congress, and journalists carve up legislation and make nice with each other. The Palm's regulars like to make themselves known. Few of them look at the menu before ordering. They address waiters whom they've never met by their first name, which is helpfully stitched onto their coats. Some call ahead and describe to the host what they're wearing, so when they walk in, they'll be identified by name. Fortunately for Washington society watchers, the Palm keeps a public record of its most important clientele. Along the walls of its otherwise stuffy dining room are dozens of caricatures of the restaurant's most famous eaters. There are Alan Tipper Gore. There's one of former House Speaker Tom Foley and another of Ted Kennedy. And then there are two portraits of Terry McAuliffe. Unlike most of the painted faces, McAuliffe's would not be recognized on any street outside of Washington. McAuliffe is as low profile as he is nondescript. Though apparently a source for many Washington reporters, he himself is rarely written about, and he is surely one of the most powerful, least recognizable people in Washington. but McAuliffe has earned his 2 palm portraits. At 40 years of age, he is the premier money man of politics, a Democratic fundraiser generally considered to be the best in either party. In 1996, McAuliffe broke records when he pulled in $37 million for President Clinton's re-election campaign in just 8 months. And since it's widely thought that whichever Democrat he signs up with in 2000 will have a huge edge in the race to become the party's nominee, McAuliffe's every move is measured by political speculators. He's so good, some Republican competitors call him the baker. Whenever he puts the heat on, dough rises. That's very cheesy. It takes a peculiar combination of skills to raise so many millions of dollars. McAuliffe has an uncanny ability to instantly remember names and faces and to recollect details about everyone he meets. After graduating in 1979, McAuliffe signed on with Jimmy Carter's 1980 presidential campaign. On his first day, he was arbitrarily assigned to work with Richard Swan, the Florida State Finance Chairman, who was organizing a fundraiser at SeaWorld. Swan, an Orlando real estate investor, took an immediate liking to McAuliffe. 6 weeks later, the SeaWorld event, which was hosted by Rosalind Carter, brought in more money than anyone had expected. 10 years later, McAuliffe would marry Swan's daughter, Dorothy. Word of the fundraising wonderkin really spread after McAuliffe approached Florida's Seminole Indian tribe for $5,000. Pointing to a 9-foot, 260-pound Everglades alligator, the tribe's chief, James Billy, told him, "You ain't getting nothing today if you don't wrestle one." The day before, the alligator had eaten a wrestler's thumb, so McAuliffe asked for pointers. Chief Billy's advice: straddle the alligator behind the head and pry open its powerful jaws. And if he lost his grip, run like hell. Shocking everyone, McAuliffe agreed, took off his shoes and socks, pushed up his sleeves, and rolled up his pant legs. He wrestled the alligator in hand-to-jaw combat for more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes that became a part of the McAuliffe legend, the man who would do virtually anything for money. 5 years later, McAuliffe graduated Georgetown Law School and entered the private sector as a Washington lawyer, banker, and sometime lobbyist. He had already agreed in 1982 to serve as finance chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, a grueling job raising money for House raises. DCCC donors learned never to tell McAuliffe that the check was in the mail. He would tell them that the mail was inefficient, they should cancel the first check and overnight him the new one. McAuliffe then went on to help House Majority Leader Dick Gephardt and then moved on to the Clinton campaign in 1992. In 1994, he was named National Finance Director of the DNC. The profession of fundraising tends to be split between 2 schools, one that focuses on tapping a select group of big donors and another that tries to maximize small contributions with a broad base of contributors. Democrats historically pay homage to the smaller donors, while Republicans concentrate on the bigger tickets. But McAuliffe disagreed with the Democratic strategy, and that year he aggressively shifted the party's focus to major donors. That move ultimately helped Clinton win re-election, but it also left him mired in a swamp of scandal. The story of McAuliffe's dash to raise money for Clinton began 2 days after Christmas in 1994. It's easy to forget how isolated Clinton was at the time. 2 months earlier, Republicans had won the House and the Senate in a landslide victory. Clinton's major policy agenda, health care reform, had failed spectacularly. His popularity had dipped to record lows. With 2 years to go till Election Day, television talk show hosts were already speculating on which Democrats would challenge Clinton in the presidential primary. Earlier that December, Harold Ickes, one of Clinton's oldest friends and his top political advisor, warned the president that his position was dangerously weak. And Ickes, perhaps more than anyone else, knew the threat such a position posed. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter had been similarly handicapped, and Senator Edward Kennedy, with Ickes as a senior advisor, had later challenged Carter for the Democratic nomination. Although Carter defeated Kennedy, the primary race weakened Carter even further, ultimately helping Ronald Reagan win. Now, Clinton was equally vulnerable. The only way to prevent such a primary challenge was to raise a lot of money and fast. Ickes, according to Bob Woodward's book, The Choice, told Clinton that the only Democrat who could raise that much money that quickly was McAuliffe. That December morning, according to 2 Clinton advisors, McAuliffe came to the White House and reassured Clinton he could get the cash. But there was a catch. McAuliffe told Clinton he needed to get those big donors in to see the president, even if only for a few minutes. Clinton agreed. 1 week later, McAuliffe sent a memo to a top Clinton aide asking him to reserve 3 dates during which Clinton could meet about 20, quote, major supporters for breakfast, lunch, or coffee. The purpose of these meetings would be to offer these people an opportunity to discuss issues and exchange ideas with the president, McAuliffe wrote. This would be an excellent way to energize our key people for the upcoming year. McAuliffe added that the events could include jogging or golfing with the president and suggested 10 big Democratic donors who might jump at the opportunity. Clinton welcomed the idea and famously jotted back, "Yes, pursue, promptly, and get other names at $100,000 or more, $50,000 or more, ready to start overnights in the Lincoln bedroom right away." During the president's first term, more than 938 people spent the night in the White House, many if not most of whom were donors. Many more drank coffee or dined privately with the president. As McAuliffe predicted, the events energized the donors and helped raise the maximum amount allowed in record speed. McAuliffe realized that he had a product to pitch that the GOP couldn't match. Says another Democratic money raiser, he had time with Clinton. The Clinton administration has danced around the issue of whether the Lincoln bedroom was, quote, rented for campaign dollars. But a little-known case provides more evidence that McAuliffe did offer time with the president. Peter Buttenwieser, a Philadelphia philanthropist who in 1995 and 1996 gave more than $150,000 to Democrats, claims McAuliffe called him on June 14th and tried to sell him a truly intimate lunch with the president. According to Buttenwieser, McAuliffe said that he could dine with the president and a handful of others in the Blue Room on June 17th if he promptly sent a check for $50,000. Insulted, Buttenwieser declined. The philanthropist then wrote a letter to McAuliffe and sent a copy to Senate Minority Leader Tom Dashley, an acquaintance of Buttenwieser's, complaining about McAuliffe's request. A copy of the letter, kept in Dashley's offices, read, "I felt uncomfortable, even demeaned last Friday, 6/14/96, when I sensed, perhaps incorrectly, that you were offering me a chance to have a small 8-person luncheon with the president in the White House on Monday for an additional $50,000 contribution to the DNC." When parts of this story were reported in the Philadelphia Inquirer, McAuliffe told the newspaper that Buttenwieser was a kook and crazy. He said he never talked to Buttenwieser on the telephone and that the philanthropist was perhaps misremembering a discussion they had at the Renaissance Mayflower Hotel in Washington. But all of Buttenwieser's charges that can be checked seem accurate. The White House confirms that Clinton ate around lunchtime in the Blue Room on June 17th. He dined with 8 guests and several staff members. Federal records indicate that at least one of the guests gave $50,000 to the DNC shortly after the lunch, and others gave $100,000 in the following weeks. McAuliffe has also maintained that he has only a passing acquaintance with John Huang. But like his Buttenwieser argument, that contention doesn't ring quite true. Since McAuliffe is renowned for remembering minute details about donors, the idea that he would not know a DNC staffer who had apparently brought in millions from a previously almost untapped donor pool, Asian Americans, seems highly unlikely. McAuliffe has explained that he worked for the Clinton-Gore campaign in 1995 and 1996 while Huang was working at the DNC. Although the campaign and the headquarters were legally distinct organizations, the Clinton White House in effort controlled them both. Ikes, for instance, ran the party's campaign from the White House basement. And McAuliffe, who served briefly as U.S. Commissioner General to South Korea in 1983, certainly had experience in raising money from Asian Americans. In the opening chapter of Brooks Jackson's respected book on campaign finance, Honest Graft, McAuliffe is depicted as fuming that then House Speaker Tip O'Neill did not show up at a Taiwanese American fundraiser in 1986. The 65 donors were left waiting for O'Neill in a private room at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. A year before, O'Neill had also blown off the group. For them, that's an insult. You just can't explain it to them, McAuliffe said at the time. It was a heart-wrenching experience. They were very, very, very disappointed. Since last November's election, McAuliffe has managed to avoid the swirl of scandal that has touched so many others who worked for the DNC and raised money for Clinton. And he remains in demand from his party's potential Clinton heirs, torn between his old boss, Dick Gephardt, and his current boss's Veep, Al Gore. White House sources say the president has tried several times to bring McAuliffe entirely into the fold by hiring him to head the Democratic National Committee. Each time, McAuliffe has said no. Some veteran McAuliffe watchers believe the fundraiser has simply benched himself for 2 years to wait for the 2000 election cycle to gear up. They believe that McAuliffe's first loyalties are to Gephardt, and working for the DNC would require him to support Gore more than he would like to. Look, both will want McAuliffe to work for them, one of McAuliffe's friends says. Hell, even the Republicans will want him, scandal or not. So where have we heard the name Terry McAuliffe before? Sounds very familiar.
We watched parents so upset because there was such sexually explicit material in the library.
I decided to check the titles at my child's school. Both of these books include pedophilia, graphically describes engaging in fellatio with male minors.
You vetoed the bill that would have informed parents that they were there.
Yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I'm Glenn Youngkin, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad.
That's right, Terry McAuliffe was the governor of Virginia, and he also ran against Glenn Youngkin and lost. If you follow McAuliffe's career, it certainly is an interesting one. He starts by raising money for the Clintons. He becomes governor of Virginia. He's trying to push this left-wing agenda. And let's not forget that Charlottesville happened in Virginia.
For many people, just the concept of a black president in the Oval Office, for many, was offensive. But they didn't really act on any of it. And then you have a president comes in who spent a lot of time on the birthing movement saying that President Obama wasn't born in America, and then all the other, he's tweeting, retweeting white supremacist, neo-Nazi activities while he's running for president. And then Trump comes in and the ban and all the things that he's done. I think it sent a signal, Dahlia, to people that, wow, if the president come out and say this stuff, I can too. And that emboldened them. And that's why they felt comfortable coming to Charlottesville. I make the point that people used to wear hoods, and they used to do this at night. They don't think they have to wear hoods anymore. But it has gone now underground on the web that this person from El Paso, this killer, who wrote his manifesto and literally specifically talks about, white supremacy, white identity, directly quoting, Donald Trump's tweets. This isn't a debate about monuments. These folks weren't just protesting the name of preserving Southern heritage. They want to maintain inequality in everything that they do, from criminal justice to education to housing, and they want to elevate racism to the highest form.
It's pretty clear in looking back to that what really happened, and it seems like there were some agitators there that obviously were trying to make the people on the right, because this was a Unite the Right rally, of course, and it made the people on the right look crazy, like they were all Nazis and fascists and everything else negative. Then, of course, they took Donald Trump's own words out of context and used it for years, and even in the presidential debate with Joe Biden, they were still trying to use that.
Did you ever think you heard any president say that I'm going to seek retribution? Did you ever hear any president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas? What got me involved to run in the first place after my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The people the ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people? And this is the guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are. The good things Hitler's done, that's what he said. This guy has no sense of American democracy.
Both of you know that story has been totally wiped out, because when you see the sentence, it said 100% exoneration on this. So he just keeps it going. He says he ran because of Charlottesville. He didn't run because of Charlottesville.
It's become pretty apparent that there's a very coordinated effort from someone to make the right look insane, like they're Nazis, like they're white supremacists. And we've seen this before in history. If you watch my last episode of the George Collection, they even used it in Israel against Yitzhak Rabin, calling him a Nazi, and look what happened to him. Same playbook, just different times. But it is very interesting that Terry McAuliffe was in George magazine, the 17th issue, talking about scandalous money raising and having to do with Clintons. You just can't make this stuff up. That does it for this episode of the George Collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process. And while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.